Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really digging into the story of Chicago's Valley Gang.
Right, an Irish-American street gang, late 19th, early 20th century stuff.
Exactly. And we've got some great historical bits here, some excerpts detailing their history.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission, basically, is to track how they went from, a street gang
It's local guys.
to a serious organized crime player, and then eventually getting absorbed into Al Capone's outfit.
Yeah, it's quite a trajectory. We'll see key figures, some pretty surprising twists too, I bet.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into it. Where does it all begin?
Well, the sources put their start in the 1890s, Chicago's Bloody Maxwell area, around 15th Street.
Bloody Maxwell. Sounds charming.
Yeah, not exactly. They started small, pickpocketing, some armed robbery, the usual street crime.
Okay, typical beginnings maybe, but how long did that last?
Not long, actually. That's what's striking. By 1900, so within maybe a decade, they were already considered a leading force in the Chicago underworld.
Wow, that fast. How,
Yeah.
what was going on in Chicago then that allowed that kind of rapid rise?
That is the question, isn't it? Maybe weak law enforcement. Existing power vacuums. The sources don't spell it all out, but you can speculate.
Yeah, you have to wonder. And sources do say they quickly escalated their activities.
Right. They weren't just pickpockets for long. They got into it with another gang, Rajan's Colts, became rivals.
Okay, so gang rivalry kicks in.
And more serious stuff, too. Labor slugging, even murder for hire.
Whoa, okay, so that's a huge jump from snatching wallets. What do you make of that shift so early on, too?
Well, it points to ambition, doesn't it? And organization. You don't just stumble into murder for hire. It means they were building connections, building a reputation, carving out turf.
Makes sense. So who was leading them during this initial period, or does it shift?
It seems to shift. The narrative really picks up a specific leader in the mid-1910s, a guy named Paddy the Bear, Ryan.
Paddy the Bear. Okay.
Yeah. He supposedly ran things from his Irish pub, South Halsted Street. And by the time Prohibition hits, the sources say he controlled most of Bloody Maxwell. So he definitely consolidated power.
But, oh, well, I sense a but coming.
Yeah,
Leadership in that world is precarious.
very. His reign didn't last forever. He was murdered in 1920
By who? Another rival.
by a guy named Walter Runt Quinlan. But here's a little twist.
Uh-huh.
There's a mention that it might have been Ryan's son, Paddy the Fox, Ryan Jr., who actually killed Quinlan shortly after.
Oh, interesting. Revenge. Or maybe clearing the way?
Could be either. What matters is Quinlan is out, Ryan Sr. is out, and that creates, well, an opening
An opening
for
for...
the next phase.
Yeah.
The rise of Frankie Lake and Terry Druggan.
Okay, new names. Druggan and Lake.
Exactly. And these guys, they saw the opportunity of Prohibition, big time.
Bootleggy.
The biggest game in town. So they pivot. They essentially rebrand as the Druggan Lake Gang.
Smart move, business-wise.
Very. And they weren't just distributing booze. They partnered up with Joseph Stenson.
Yeah, that name's in here.
And they started acquiring breweries, several of them by the early 1920s.
Breweries. So they're controlling production now. That's ambitious.
It shows real business sense, right?
Yeah.
Adaptability. They saw the market and they built an actual, illegal enterprise around it, much more profitable than just street crime.
And with that kind of money comes influence, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are pretty clear on this. They used that wealth to buy political clout, police protection, the works.
Which leads to that crazy story in 1924.
Right. Lake and Druggan actually get sentenced. A year in Cook County Jail.
Sounds like justice, maybe?
Yeah, but not quite. Not even close. They were apparently let out regularly, like they had keys to the place or something.
How is that even possible?
Political connections. A 20th Ward alderman, Morris Eller, is mentioned, and bribes. Big ones.
How big?
The source says $20,000 to the sheriff, Peter Hoffman, and the warden, Wesley Westbrook.
20 grand back then. That's staggering. It just shows the level of corruption, doesn't it? It really does. Just blatant. They could basically come and go as they pleased from prison.
Yeah.
Tells you a lot about Chicago at the time.
But someone must have noticed. You can't keep that quiet forever.
Nope. The Chicago American newspaper blew the lid off it, exposed the whole thing.
And heads rolled. Please tell me heads rolled.
Well, sort of. There were consequences, but maybe not as severe as you'd hope.
Like what?
Sheriff Hoffman got a fine and just 1 month in jail. The warden, Westbrook, got 4 months.
That's it, for letting gangsters run free.
Seems light, yeah. It highlights how hard it is to root out that kind of systemic corruption, I guess, even when it's exposed.
Okay, so Druggan and Lake are out. They've survived this massive scandal. What next? Does this attract attention?
Big-time attention. Specifically, Al Capone's attention.
Ah, the big fish notices the ripples.
Exactly. Capone sees this powerful, albeit scandalous operation, and the bootleg wars are raging around this time, 1925 or so.
So an opportunity.
An opportunity for Capone. After Lake and Druggan get out of jail properly this time, an alliance is formed. An alliance. So not a hostile takeover.
Not initially. The deal apparently was that Druggan and Lake would give Capone 40% of their profits.
40%? That's steep. What do they get in return?
Protection. Specifically, protection from their old rivals, Rajan's Colts.
Ah, so Capone handles the competition for them.
Right. The sources even named names from Rajan's Colts: Danny Stanton, Gunnar McPadden, Huey McGovern.
Guys Capone needed to deal with anyway, probably.
Very likely. And the source notes many of those guys were later killed in the bootleg wars. So for Druggan and Lake, it was maybe a necessary price for survival. For Capone, it brings a huge earner under his umbrella.
Makes strategic sense for both, in a grim sort of way.
Yeah.
So what happens to the Valley Gang, or the Druggan Lake Gang, after this? Do they stay independent under Capone's protection?
Not for long. The next big blow comes in 1932. Tax evasion charges for Druggan and Lake.
A classic downfall. Capone went down that way too, didn't he?
He did. It was often the only way the feds could make charges stick. So, with that conviction and the end of Prohibition approaching,
They just get absorbed.
pretty much entirely. By the end of Prohibition, the Valley Gang, as an independent entity, is gone. They become part of the Chicago outfit.
Doing what for the outfit?
According to this, they essentially became the outfit's leading enforcers.
From pickpockets to lead enforcers for Capone? What a journey.
And here's the kicker. Many of them, including Terry Druggan himself, reportedly retired.
Retired. Like, peacefully.
And extremely wealthy.
Wow, after all that violence and crime, they just cash out.
It seems so. It really speaks to the insane amounts of money floating around during Prohibition, doesn't it?
It really does. Let's focus on Terry Druggan for a minute, though. He seems like a key figure throughout that later period.
Absolutely. He was leading or co-leading from about 1919 right through Prohibition.
What was he like? The source would give a description, right?
Yeah, kind of fascinating. Physically small, apparently, but with an explosive temper.
Ah, the Napoleon complex, perhaps?
Maybe. And he had a lisp, but was known as a really tough street fighter. Don't let the size fool you.
And ambitious.
Definitely. Wanted to expand beyond just the Valley territory. And the wealth, I mean. By 1924, it says even his junior members were wearing silk shirts and riding in Rolls Royces with chauffeurs.
Silk shirts and rollers for the foot soldiers. That's incredible.
It's pure ostentatious display, isn't it? Projecting power.
And he made smart connections too, right? Like with Torrio.
Yeah, Johnny Torrio, he apparently made profitable deals with him and even remodeled the gang's structure based on how Torrio had organized Colosimo's outfit before him.
So, learning from the top guys. Adapting.
Exactly, showing that strategic thinking again. He wasn't just the thug, he was building an organization.
In his lifestyle after Prohibition, it's almost comical.
It's something else. A lavish place on Lake Zurich, a winter home in Florida,
12 new cars.
a swimming pool and tennis court, which the source adds he couldn't actually use because he didn't know how to swim or play tennis.
That's amazing. Just pure status symbols.
And livestock.
Yep.
Dairy cattle, sheep, pigs, plus a thoroughbred racing stable. Racing horses in his family's Celtic colors at Chicago tracks.
A real Renaissance man of crime. And wasn't there a story about the racing?
Oh, yeah. Apparently, one of his horses got disqualified, suspected race fixing. Druggan supposedly pulled a gun on the racing officials and forced them to change the ruling back in his favor.
That just sums it up, doesn't it? The temper, the power, the absolute disregard for rules.
It really does. Raw intimidation shows how much power these guys wielded, even in supposedly legitimate areas like horse racing.
So ultimately, the Druggan and Lake Gang, the former Valley Gang, just melts into the bigger Chicago syndicate post-Prohibition. No more independent operation.
Correct. Their independent existence ceased. They became a division, essentially, of the larger outfit.
It's quite the arc. And just to remind everyone listening, Chicago back then wasn't some small town.
Not at all. Third biggest city in the U.S., the hub of Chicagoland, millions of people.
A huge, sprawling, growing city.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is the kind of place where something like the Valley Gang could emerge and thrive. For a time anyway.
That kind of rapid growth, social change, economic upheaval, it often creates cracks where organized crime can flourish. And Prohibition was like pouring gasoline on that fire.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've tracked the Valley Gang from, 15th Street hustlers
To Patty the Bear's rule, then the Druggan Lake bootlegging empire.
through that insane prison scandal, the alliance with Capone.
And finally, getting swallowed by the outfit with guys like Druggan walking away rich.
It's a story of ambition, violence, corruption, and incredible adaptability, really. Terry Druggan stands out as such a character.
Definitely. A microcosm of that era's gangster profile, maybe.
So thinking about the whole sweep, what's the main thing you take away from their story?
For me, it really highlights just how fluid and, frankly, entrepreneurial the underworld was back then. You see this local gang rise fast, get powerful, challenge others.
But ultimately couldn't stay independent.
Right. It shows how bigger, more organized forces like Capone's outfit eventually consolidated power. Local power could rise, but it often got absorbed in the end. The mix of wealth, violence, and corruption was just the defining feature.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Seeing how the Valley Gang climbed so high and then got integrated, what does that cycle tell us about how organized crime works? About the forces that shape it, maybe even today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.